When my boyfriend told me he had no wallet and needed to crash at another woman's place, I didn't argue. I just gathered every gift I'd ever given him and brought them right to her doorstep. His angry 4 a.m. text blew up my phone. But what came next revealed the truth he thought I'd never uncover. I found his wallet in his nightstand drawer at 9:47 p.m. The same wallet he said he lost miles away. My hand still held my phone, his message glowing on the screen. Babe, my wallet's gone. Stuck across town with no cash for a ride. Crashing at Sienna's tonight. Don't worry, I stared at the brown leather sitting there untouched. Credit cards visible through the clear window. And something inside me went completely quiet. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of finally seeing the truth. He wasn't across town, stranded, or helpless. He was at another woman's apartment, counting on me being too tired, too trusting, too worn down to check. I picked up that wallet, feeling its weight in my hand, and made a choice that changed everything. If he wanted to spend the night at Sienna's so bad, he'd get everything he deserved, including every gift I'd ever wasted on him. I'm Clara, and this is the night I stopped falling for his lies. The text had come 20 minutes earlier while I was wiping down the last table at Rosewood Diner. I'd worked a double shift from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, and my feet felt like they would give out. The kitchen lights flickered overhead like they had for weeks, casting everything in this sick yellow glow that made even fresh food look spoiled. I pulled out my phone with one hand, keeping the other scrubbing a ketchup stain that probably sat there since lunch. When I read August's message, my hands went ice cold. Not the slow chill of forgetting gloves in winter, but a sharp, bone-deep freeze that started in my fingertips and shot straight up my arms to my chest. Under those dying fluorescent lights, I read those words again and again, while Janelle called, "Good night" from the back door, and the cook scraped the grill with a noise like nails on metal. Everything felt so distant, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. I clocked out silently, grabbed my coat from the hook near the staff bathroom, and walked home through streets smelling of October rain and wet pavement. $47 in tips folded in my apron pocket. Money meant for whatever bill screamed the loudest this week. The gas bill, the internet warning, or maybe groceries if I was lucky. 3.5 years, that's how long I'd been with August. 3.5 years of me working doubles and split shifts while he figured himself out, chased opportunities, and built his network. 3.5 years of me carrying us both financially while he promised things would turn around. Any day now, just wait and see. My apartment building came into view, peeling paint and crooked mailboxes. The kind of place where the elevator had been broken 2 months and nobody expected it to get fixed. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, my legs aching with every step, and found 2 disconnection notices taped to my door. For gas and internet, both screaming in that harsh neon print designed to "I had hoped someone would fix it." I climbed 3 flights of stairs, my legs aching with every step, only to find 2 disconnection notices taped to my door. Gas and internet, both printed on that harsh neon paper, meant to grab your attention. They wanted to shame me, to spread my troubles to every neighbor who happened by. I tore those notes down and shoved them into my coat pocket, adding to the pile of proof showing just how one-sided this relationship really was. Inside the apartment, the only sound was the steady drip from the bathroom faucet. The place was dark and still. That faucet, August promised he'd fix it 8 months ago, then 6 months ago. Then he stopped promising altogether. I stopped asking too, just placed a bowl under it to catch the water and tried hard to ignore the drip when I tried to sleep. I dropped my keys onto the counter. They clattered way too loud in the silence. I pulled out my phone and read his message again, this time really paying attention. "Babe, my wallet's missing. Stuck across town with no cash for a ride. Crashing at Sienna's tonight. Don't worry, okay." Each word felt intentional. Babe to fake some closeness. Wallet's gone to create a problem. Stuck across town to explain why he couldn't come home. Sienna's tonight to see how much disrespect I'd take without pushback. And don't worry, okay. The early stop to any argument I might raise. Something shifted in my chest. No, not broke, but it snapped into focus, like a bone that's been out of place for years finally set right. I walked to the hall closet and grabbed the Christmas box, the one that held his noise-canceling headphones. The headphones he'd begged me for, the ones I worked 3 weeks of overtime to buy. Then, moving in a strange, calm way, I opened his nightstand drawer. That's where I found it. The wallet. His wallet. The brown leather one I gave him for our second anniversary. The one he'd picked out after weeks of dropping hints that I finally caught on to. I'd saved money by skipping lunches and walking to work instead of riding the bus. His wallet was sitting there, perfect and untouched. Credit cards lined up in their slots. Driver's license clear through the plastic window. Even some cash, tucked inside. I picked it up, feeling its weight, and that's when silence hit me. Not shock or confusion, but the quiet of full understanding. He wasn't stuck across town. He wasn't broke or stranded. No helpless victim needing a friend's couch. He was lying, outright and on purpose, believing I'd be too tired from 10-hour shifts, too worn out from 3 years carrying both of us, too beaten down to think about checking his story. The name Finn burned in my mind. I'd met her twice, both times leaving a sour feeling in my gut that women learn to trust, even when they're told they're overreacting. The first was at Marcus's birthday party last spring, where she'd snatched all of August's attention, touching his shoulder when she spoke, laughing louder at his jokes, leaning in like I wasn't even standing there holding a beer I didn't want. On the ride home, when I said I felt uneasy, August flipped it on me so smoothly I almost missed the play. "You're being paranoid, Clara. He's just friendly. You're making things up because you're insecure." The next time was 3 months ago, right after I got off work, laughing beside him, her shoulder brushing his, leaning in like I wasn't even there, holding a beer I didn't want to drink. When I told August I felt uneasy on the drive home, he flipped it on me so smoothly I almost didn't see the manipulation. "You're being paranoid, Clara," he said. "He's just friendly. You're making drama up because you're insecure." The second time was 3 months ago, right after work. I got off work early and decided to surprise him with lunch at that coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, I saw them bent over his laptop together, her hand casually resting on his forearm. They both looked up, startled when I showed up at their table, and August spun a quick excuse. "We're just working on a project idea." The laptop shut a little too fast. Now here I was holding solid proof that he had lied about something so simple and easy to check. If he lied about this small thing, something verifiable in just half a minute, what else had he been hiding all this time? I set the wallet on the kitchen counter, staring down at it. My reflection looked back at me in the dark window above the sink, still in my diner uniform, marked with grease stains and hair tied back in a messy ponytail that had been unraveling for hours. Exhaustion showed in every line on my face. But my eyes held something different now, something sharper, clearer. I pulled a cardboard box from the closet and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I started gathering stuff, moving through the apartment with a new sense of purpose. The smartwatch from his dresser, the one he had begged for last Christmas, promising it would help him stay organized and reach his goals. It sat unused and uncharged in its box, barely touched after the first week. The Italian leather belt I'd given him for his birthday. The cologne that had cost me tips from 3 full shifts. The vintage denim jacket from that Portland trip that I'd paid for completely, while he promised to pay me back later. The books. The books were there too. The 4-Hour Work Week, Think and Grow Rich. All their spines perfect, no pages bent. Bookmarks still stuck on page 1. Everyone bought because he swore this time he'd really focus on self-improvement. Every item I added to the box was a memory of me trying to fill the space where his effort should have been. A reminder that I'd been playing both roles, the loving partner and the provider, the dreamer and the realist, the giver and the one who never got anything back. The box got heavier as I packed, not from weight, but from all the understanding sinking in. I found more things, too, a receipt crumpled up in the back of his drawer from Tavern and Tap, that upscale bar downtown. $14,763, dated 3 weeks ago. The very night he told me he was helping Marcus move furniture and couldn't make our dinner reservation. The reservation I'd saved 2 months of tips to afford. I snapped a photo of the receipt before adding it to the box. When I finished, I sealed it tightly with packing tape. The sound felt sharp and final in the silence of the apartment. I grabbed a permanent marker and wrote across the top in big bold letters, "For August, since he's staying the night. Clara." I stepped back and looked at what I'd made. This wasn't just a box of his stuff. It was 3.5 years worth of proof that I'd been loving someone who was only using me. It was 11:52 p.m. I pulled out my phone and ordered a rideshare. I knew Sienna's address. August had mentioned it once with that jealous tone, talking about her fancy corner unit on the 15th floor, like he was picturing himself living there already. While I waited for the car, I sat on the couch, holding my phone and staring at his message one last time. "Don't worry, okay?" But I wasn't worried, because now I had the truth, and I was finally free. His place, I knew where it was. August had mentioned it once with that jealous edge in his voice, talking about her insane corner apartment on the 15th floor, like he was already picturing himself living there. While waiting for my ride, I sat on the couch, staring at his message again. "Don't worry, okay?" But I wasn't worried. No, not at all. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't tangled up in worry or telling myself that things would improve if I just tried harder and loved deeper. I was done stressing, done hoping, and I was ready to make sure August knew exactly what he'd lost. My phone buzzed with a rideshare alert, 5 minutes away. I stood in the center of my apartment, clutching that box with August's name boldly written on top. Suddenly, those 5 minutes felt like forever and no time at all at once. My heart raced, not from fear, but from something clearer. Pure adrenaline mixed with a sharp kind of focus, the kind of feeling you get before crossing a line you can't take back. I set the box on the kitchen table and looked around the apartment with fresh eyes. There was so much more than I'd started packing. I'd grabbed the obvious stuff, the wallet, the watch, the books. But now, everywhere I looked, I saw tiny signs of 3.5 years spent trying to fill the space where his effort should have been, hidden on every surface, tucked in every drawer. I walked over to the bedroom closet and opened the door. His vintage denim jacket hung there, the one I'd spotted at that flea market in Portland during our romantic weekend getaway last year. I paid for the whole trip, hotel, gate, meals, you name it. August promised he'd pay me back once his freelance check came through, but he never did. I worked extra shifts for 2 months to afford that weekend, convincing myself that quality time together was worth the sacrifice. I pulled the jacket off its hanger. It still smelled faintly like that little vintage store, musty with old cod and memories that weren't mine. August wore it exactly 3 times before deciding it wasn't really his style. I folded it and placed it in the box. On his dresser, the smartwatch sat in its charger, dead as a doornail. He had begged for that watch last Christmas, sending me links about how it would change his life, make him more productive, healthier, better. "This is what I need to finally get serious about my health," he told me, claiming he had worked extra during the holiday rush and put up with nightmare customers, all just to buy this watch. He used it with excitement for a week, then sporadically for another, and then, not at all. I unplugged the dead watch and dropped it into the box. The Italian leather belt hung behind the bathroom door. I'd found it at a boutique downtown during lunch, spending money I should have saved for groceries because August had admired a similar one in a magazine. I wanted to surprise him, $78 for a belt I wasn't sure I could afford. I remembered standing at the register, mentally calculating if I could make it to payday without dipping deeper into my account. The belt came off the hook and joined the pile. I moved through the apartment like a detective gathering clues for a case. The cologne on the bathroom counter, still 3/4 full, despite costing more than my electric bill. 3 shifts worth of tips gone to a scent he hardly used. He wore it maybe twice before calling it too strong and switching back to his cheap drugstore body spray. The wireless speaker sat dusty on the kitchen windowsill, bought because he said he needed it for his morning motivation routine that fizzled out after 4 days. Found his belt at a boutique downtown on my lunch break. I spent money I really needed for groceries just because August had admired a similar one in a magazine, and I wanted to surprise him. $78 for a belt. I stood at the register with my debit card, silently figuring out if I could stretch what I had until payday. The belt went back on the hook, just like everything else. Moving through the apartment, I felt like I was gathering evidence for a case. Cologne sat on the bathroom counter, still mostly full even though it cost more than my electric bill. That was 3 full shifts worth of tips, and he'd worn it maybe twice before saying it smelled too strong and switching back to cheap body spray. The wireless speaker on the kitchen windowsill was dusty and unused, bought for some morning routine that lasted, 4 days? It was a reminder of promises made but never kept. He went right back to sleeping until noon. The running shoes in the closet, barely touched, that he insisted would get him back in shape and help clear his mind for better focus. I had bought them instead of replacing my own worn-out work shoes that had holes in the soles. I'd been stuffing cardboard inside my sneakers to cover the worn spots, while brand-new Nikes sat untouched in our closet. Each item I added to the box weighed heavier, but not from actual weight, from the growing understanding. I opened the drawer of our coffee table, the cheap particle board one we'd picked up from curbside trash day, and found the charging cables he'd urgently needed for work, the portable battery that would let him work anywhere, the laptop stand designed to improve his posture and boost productivity. All unused, all paid for with my money, my time, my tired feet aching from hours of standing while strangers complained about their eggs being too runny or their coffee not hot enough. I spotted the gym bag in the hall closet, tag still on it. Another birthday gift, another promise to stick to a fitness routine that supposedly would change everything. The bag had never stepped foot in a gym. The coffee maker sat on the counter, the one he swore would fuel his productivity after reading some article about successful people's morning rituals. I bought it instead of replacing my winter coat with the broken zipper. I'd spent that whole winter clutching my coat closed with my hand while August got his coffee maker for the motivation he never found. As I packed, I wasn't just gathering his things. I was digging up who I once was. The woman who believed love meant endless giving. That being partners meant carrying someone else's weight until you broke your back. That if you just sacrificed enough, gave enough, worked hard enough, he would meet you halfway. I was so wrong. My hand brushed something crumpled in the back of his sock drawer while I checked for anything else I'd gotten him. Paper. I pulled it out and smoothed it under the lamplight. A receipt from Tavern and Tap. My stomach sank even as I knelt down. The date stared at me. It was from 3 weeks ago. The total was $14,763. I recognized that date. I knew it because I'd spent 2 months saving tips just to book a table at Giovanni's, that fancy Italian spot downtown where dinner started at $30. August's birthday dinner. I'd called 3 times to confirm the reservation, asked for the corner table by the window, even inquired about their wine list so I'd sound knowledgeable when we ordered. The night before, August texted me saying Marcus needed help moving furniture, and it was the only night he could. "I'm really sorry, babe. I know you were excited, but Marcus is kind of desperate here. Can we reschedule?" I said yes because I wanted to be understanding and supportive, because good partners don't make their boyfriends choose between them and their friends. That night, I ate leftover soup from the diner alone in this apartment, telling myself that his friendship with Marcus mattered, that I was mature for not making a big deal over a missed reservation. Now here I was, holding proof that he'd spent nearly $150 at an upscale bar, the exact same night he said he'd been lifting boxes and moving furniture. The same night I had been. I was eating soup that was 2 days old, convincing myself it was okay. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the receipt, not out of sadness, but pure anger. Anger at him for lying so easily, and anger at myself for being so ready to believe him, so eager to forgive, so desperate not to seem dramatic, insecure, or paranoid. This wasn't just proof of his lies. It was proof that I'd been part of my own undoing. Every time I ignored my doubts, every time I talked myself out of trusting my gut, every time I chose to trust him over myself, I erased a bit of who I was. I placed the receipt right on top inside the box where it would be clear to see. The book sat on the shelf near the TV. Shoe Dog, The 4-Hour Work Week, Think and Grow Rich. All bought because August once wanted to focus on bettering himself and learn from those who had made it. All brand new, all untouched. The bookmarks I'd slipped in still marked the very first page in each. Into the box they went. I stepped back and looked at everything I'd gathered. The box was now full, stuffed with real proof of 3.5 years of emotional lies. Each thing was a reminder of me trying to fix something that was broken at its core, trying to fill the space where a partner should have stood, trying to love someone into becoming the person they promised they'd be. I grabbed some packing tape from the junk drawer in the kitchen and sealed the box. The tape's sharp ripping sound echoed through the quiet apartment like a judge's gavel. With a black marker, I wrote in big letters across the top, "For August, since he's staying the night, CL." I stepped back and stared at the words. My mother's voice echoed in my head from 2 years ago when she came for Thanksgiving. She'd sat at this very kitchen table that morning, sipping instant coffee because our machine was broken, watching August sleep till noon while I got ready for my diner shift. "Honey," she said softly, her voice gentle like she was approaching a hurt animal. "Love shouldn't feel like you're the only one rowing the boat." I got defensive right away. I rattled off all of August's good traits, said he just needed time and patience to find his way. Told her she didn't get how tough it was to build a life these days, that not everyone had the same chances. That I chose to stand by him through the hard times so we could celebrate when things got better. She didn't argue, only kissed my forehead and said, "I hope you're right, sweetheart." Now, standing in my apartment with a bong full of broken promises and wasted money, her words didn't sound like concern anymore. They felt like a warning coming true. My phone buzzed. My rideshare was 2 minutes away. I grabbed my coat and picked up the box. It was heavy, not in pounds, but with everything it stood for. 3.5 years of me shrinking down, trying to make space for someone who took everything and gave nothing back. As I headed to the door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Still in my diner uniform, my hair loose from its ponytail, exhaustion clear on my face, but my eyes, they were different now. Harder, clearer. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The weight inside me felt heavy, not because of my body, but because of everything I'd suppressed. 3.5 years of shrinking myself to fit alongside someone who took all the space and gave nothing back. As I headed to the door, I caught my reflection in the entryway mirror. Still in my diner uniform, hair loose from its ponytail, exhaustion etched into my face. But my eyes held something new. Strength, clarity. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't nervous or trying to convince myself that working harder would fix things. For the first time in 3 years, I was doing something just for me, and it felt like I'd taken my first real breath in forever. The car pulled up just 30 seconds after I stepped outside. It was a silver sedan with a dent in the passenger door and an air freshener that smelled like fake pine. The driver was a quiet man in his 40s with tired eyes and a Seahawks cap. The kind of guy who'd probably been driving it all night and wasn't stopping until dawn. He glanced at me through the rearview mirror as I slid into the back seat carrying the box, but didn't ask any questions. He just nodded when I gave him the address. Riverside Towers. "You know it." "Yeah, I know it," he said, his voice calm and professional. He pulled away from the curb and the familiar streets of my neighborhood faded behind us. I set the box on my lap, wrapping my arms around it like it was something precious, not proof of my own mistakes. My reflection looked back at me from the window, jaw tight, eyes dry, posture stiff. Streetlights flickered across my face in steady beats. Each time the light hit, I looked less like the woman who'd left Rosewood Diner 3 hours earlier and more like someone I didn't know. I barely recognized her. And that felt just right. The streets were mostly empty, just past midnight on a Tuesday. We drove past a gas station where a man filled up his truck, a convenience store with flickering neon signs, and a bus stop where someone sat alone, scrolling on their phone. Normal people living normal nights, totally unaware that my whole world had just split into before and after. I knew Sienna's address because August mentioned it once. About 6 months ago, we were eating Chinese takeout on the couch, me paying as usual. He was scrolling on his phone when he suddenly said, "Size place is insane. Corner unit on the 15th floor, floor to ceiling windows. She's really living it up." There was something in his voice that caught my attention, not admiration exactly, More like longing, like he was talking about a life he wanted but felt he couldn't reach. My stomach twisted, but I pushed the feeling down, told myself I was being paranoid, told myself he was just making small talk, said all the things women tell themselves when something's off but they're not ready to admit it. Now that memory felt like a clue I'd been gathering without knowing. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there?" "Yeah." My voice sounded firmer than I expected. For the first time in a long time, actually. He nodded like he understood more than I'd said out loud, and we drove on in quiet comfort. Riverside Towers emerged from the dark like it belonged to another city, another life. All glass and steel, a symbol of manufactured luxury. A building that screamed successful young professional, even though everyone inside was probably drowning in student loans and credit card debt, just like the rest of us. The only difference was the shine on the outside. The lobby glowed warm and golden through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, I could see the doorman sitting at his desk, a decorative fig tree planted in concrete, and abstract artwork hanging on the walls. The driver glanced back in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there?" "Yeah." My voice was firmer than I expected, first time in a long time. He nodded as if he understood what I wouldn't say aloud. We drove the rest of the way without a word. Riverside Towers rose out of the night like it belonged to another world. All glass and steel, pure manufactured luxury. A place that shouted successful young professional, though inside probably everyone was buried in student loans and credit card debt, just like me. The only difference was what you saw on the outside. The lobby glowed warmly through floor-to-ceiling windows. I saw the doorman at his desk, a neat fig tree and a concrete planter. Abstract art on the walls. Card debt, just like the rest of us. The only difference was the facade. The lobby glowed warm and golden through floor-to-ceiling windows. I could see the doorman at his desk, a decorative fig tree and a concrete planter. Abstract art hung on the walls that probably cost more than my entire car. "This is fancy," I thought, as the driver pulled up to the main entrance. "You want help with that box?" "No thanks, I got it." I paid through the app, tipped him well for giving me quiet when I needed it, and stepped onto the spotless sidewalk. The door clicked softly shut behind me, and the car drove off, leaving me alone with my box and my determination. The lobby doors were locked, but through the glass I saw the doorman, a guy in his mid-20s clearly bored, scrolling on his phone. I knocked on the glass and he looked up, annoyed at being disturbed. He came over and cracked the door open. "Can I help you? I'm delivering something to a friend, Sienna Brennan, 15 Golf." He stared at me, diner uniform, messy ponytail, cardboard box with a name scrawled in permanent marker. I could see him deciding if I was legit or just a problem he didn't want to deal with. Whatever he saw on my face must have convinced him I wasn't worth the trouble because he just shrugged and waved me in. "Elevators are on the right." "Thanks." The lobby was just as pretentious as I'd pictured it. Marble floors that echoed under my worn-out sneakers. A chandelier that probably cost more than I make in a year. A sitting area with leather chairs nobody ever used because this wasn't the kind of place neighbors chatted. I walked to the elevators and pressed the up button. My reflection shone in the polished steel doors, harsh and unkind under the bright lights. The woman staring back had worked herself nearly to the bone for someone barely able to fake gratitude. Dark circles under her eyes. Grease stains on her uniform that refused to come out no matter how often she washed it. Hands cracked and dry from constant washing and sanitizer. But her jaw was firm, her eyes steady, her back straight. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open. The ride up felt like it dragged on, then was over in a blink. The elevator was all mirrors, ceiling, walls. Even the handrails gleamed like glass. Everywhere I looked, I saw myself holding this box, watching my reflection like a character in a movie. Someone brave, someone done with the lies, someone who had finally chosen herself. My heart beat fast as the floors passed, not from fear or sadness, but something new, anticipation. The thrill of finally standing up instead of taking whatever August handed me. The elevator chimed softly as I reached the 15th floor, and the doors opened onto a hallway smelling of fancy candles and fresh paint. The carpet was plush beneath my feet, the lighting soft and gentle. Apartment doors lined both sides, all the same except for their brushed steel numbers. I found 15 golf at the hall's end, a corner unit exactly like August said. I wondered how many times he'd been here, how many lies he'd told to cover his absences, how many times I believed him, because it was easier to believe than face the truth. I set the box right in front of her door and squared my shoulders. Then I knocked 3 times, loud and clear, the kind of knock that says, "I'm not going anywhere until you answer." I heard movement inside, footsteps drawing near, a pause, probably peeking through the peephole, then the sound of locks turning. The door creaked open. Anticipation welled up inside me, the thrill of finally doing something instead of accepting whatever August decided to hand me. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 15th floor. The doors opened to a hallway that smelled like fresh paint and secrets. The scent of pricey candles and fresh paint filled the air. The carpet cushioned softly under my feet, and the lighting was warm, glowing gently without glaring. Apartment doors stretched along both sides of the hall, all the same except for the brushed steel numbers. I found 15G at the far end, the corner unit just like August promised. I wondered how many times he had been here, how many lies he fed me to cover up his disappearances, and how many times I'd swallowed those lies because pretending was easier than facing the truth. I placed the box right in front of her door and squared my shoulders. Then I knocked 3 times. Firm and loud, the kind of knock that says, "I'm not leaving until you answer." I heard movement inside, footsteps drawing near, a pause, probably a peek through the peephole, then the click of locks turning. The door swung open, loud, deliberate, the kind of knocking that says, "I'm not going away until you answer." I heard movement inside, footsteps approaching, a pause, probably looking through the peephole, then the sound of locks turning. The door opened. Sienna stood there in yoga pants and an oversized cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than what I made all week. Her hair fell in those perfect, effortless waves that actually take 20 minutes of careful styling to look that casual. In one hand, she held a wine glass, half full of red wine, and her face flickered through emotions quicker than I could name. First confusion, then recognition, and finally something that looked a lot like guilt hiding behind a forced smile. "Clara," her voice came out shaky, like she couldn't quite believe I was standing in her hallway. "What are you—" I cut her off. "These belong to August." My voice was steady and cold, nothing like the woman who used to apologize for taking up space. "Since he's staying here tonight, I thought you should have them, for convenience." Her face lost all color. The wine glass trembled in her hand, the red wine wobbling dangerously close to the edge. "He's not." Her voice came out defensive and panicked, exactly how someone sounds when caught in a lie they never saw coming. I watched her scramble for an excuse, her eyes darting to the box, then back to me, trying to figure out how much I knew and how to twist the truth. Slowly, I pulled out my phone and brought up a photo, the tavern and the receipt, holding it just inches from her face. "3 weeks ago," I said calm and clear, like presenting evidence in court. $147 for drinks and appetizers. The same night he told me he was helping Marcus move furniture and couldn't make our dinner reservation. The one I'd saved 2 months' tips for. Sienna's eyes widened as she stared at the receipt. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Funny thing," I continued, "I called Marcus yesterday for something totally unrelated. He hasn't moved in 2 years. Same apartment, same furniture. Everything exactly where it's always been." I watched the shock wash over her face, the realization that she'd been lied to, just like me. The wheels turning as she tried to figure out what else wasn't true. "I don't want explanations," I said, feeling a strange power in my calm voice. "I don't want apologies, excuses, or whatever stories you've been sold. I just want you to understand this clearly. He's been lying to both of us. Maybe others too. I don't know. And honestly, I don't care anymore. But now he's your problem. Congratulations on your prize." I turned and headed back to the elevator before she could say a word. My back straight, head held high. Behind me, I heard her voice call out, "Wait, or maybe Clara, please." But I didn't look back. The elevator doors slid open as if they'd been waiting just for me. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Sienna standing in her doorway, wine glass forgotten in her hand, staring at the box with August's name written on it in permanent marker. That elevator ride sealed the chapter closed. Everything that had happened in that hallway, in that relationship, in those 3.5 years of carrying someone who never planned to walk beside me, all locked away behind cold, polished steel. Maybe it mattered to both of us, maybe even to others. I don't know, and I don't care now. But from here on, he's your problem. Congratulations on your prize. Without waiting for her reply, I turned toward the elevator, standing tall and proud. Behind me, I heard her voice calling out, "Wait, or maybe Clara, please." But I didn't look back. The elevator doors parted like they'd been waiting for me. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last sight of Sienna standing in her doorway, wine glass forgotten in hand, staring at the box with August's name scrawled across the top in permanent marker. That chapter closed with those elevator doors. Everything that happened in that hallway, that relationship, those 3.5 years of carrying someone who never planned to walk beside me, all of it sealed behind polished steel. And I didn't glance back once. The rideshare driver who picked me up from Riverside Towers was nothing like the first one. She was a woman in her 50s who asked if I was okay the moment I got in. I must have looked like I'd either just committed a crime or barely escaped one. Maybe a bit of both. "I'm fine," I told her. And oddly enough, I really meant it. Actually, I felt better than fine. She nodded like she understood something unspoken and didn't press me for answers. We drove through empty streets back toward my neighborhood, past darkened shops and flickering streetlights. I watched the world pass by the window, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I got home, I paused in the doorway, just standing there for a long while before stepping inside. It was the same apartment I'd left only an hour ago, but everything felt different now. The air felt fresher. The silence felt peaceful instead of suffocating. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, closing my eyes, letting the weight of what I'd just done sink deep into my bones. I delivered a box filled with broken promises right to another woman's door at midnight. I'd confronted her with proof of August's lies, and I'd walked away without a word. No apologies, no explanations, and I felt perfectly calm. I peeled off my diner uniform that still reeked of fryer grease and coffee. I balled it up and threw it into the hamper, a little harder than I needed to. Digging through my dresser, under winter sweaters I hadn't worn in years, I found an old college t-shirt from a music festival I'd been to before I met August, before I learned to shrink myself to fit his ego. I slipped it on, and it felt like slipping into a part of myself I'd lost along the way. The shower was so hot, it turned my skin pink, and I stood under the water longer than I should have, watching the day wash away. When I finally stomached it out, I made chamomile tea in the mug my mother gave me, the one with the chip on the rim that August always griped about, but I refused to toss. I carried the mug to the couch, wrapped myself in a blanket from the back of the sofa, and sat down to wait, because I knew what was coming. Part of me, the exhausted part that just wanted to sleep, thought about turning off my phone, but an even bigger part, one that had been silenced, dismissed, and gaslit for 3 years, needed to see his reaction. I needed to watch him scramble, panic, and reveal the real person he was when he lost control of his story. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant sirens somewhere outside my window. The normal sounds of city life, somehow comforting in their familiar rhythm. I sipped my tea and felt a curious peace, like watching a storm roll in from behind thick glass. Dangerous and wild out there, but completely unable to reach me here. My phone sat on the coffee table, dark and silent, like a ticking bomb waiting to go off. I stared at it, waiting. At 4:02 in the morning, it finally did. The screen lit up with a text notification, and even from where I sat, I could see the rage in the all-caps message. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I picked up the phone, unlocked it, and before I could finish reading, more messages flooded in. "You showed up at Sienna's. Are you insane? You embarrassed me. You embarrassed her. What kind of psycho does that? Answer your phone now." I set the phone back down and took a slow sip of tea, watching the screen light up again. knowing this was just the beginning. I lost control of the story. The apartment was silent except for the quiet hum of the fridge and distant sirens somewhere outside my window. Normal city sounds, oddly comforting in their everyday routine. I sipped my tea, feeling peacefully detached, like watching a storm from behind thick glass. Dangerous chaos beyond, but completely out of reach here. My phone lay on the coffee table, dark and silent. I stared at it as if waiting for a bomb to go off. At 4:02 a.m., it finally happened. The screen lit up with a text alert, and even from where I sat, I could tell the message was full of yelling. "What the hell is wrong with you?" it said. I grabbed the phone, unlocked it, and barely finished reading before more messages flooded in. "You showed up at Sienna's. Are you crazy? You embarrassed me. You embarrassed her. What kind of psycho does that? Answer your phone now." I put the phone down and took another sip of tea, watching the screen flare up again and again. First one, "You showed up at Sienna's. Are you insane? You embarrassed me. You embarrassed her. What kind of psycho does that? Answer your phone." Now I set the phone back down and took another sip of tea, watching the screen light up. Messages kept flooding in, each one crazier than the last. There was something almost satisfying about it. Watching him unravel, seeing the carefully crafted mask he'd worn for 3 years finally slip away, exposing the selfish, manipulative man beneath. My phone lit up with a call. August's name and photo, him, smiling at a barbecue last summer, looking innocent and charming, filled the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail, but then it rang again right away. I declined the call and saw another text pop up. "Pick up the phone." Then another, "We need to talk like adults." Next, "You're acting crazy. Calm down." I opened my screenshots folder and started saving everything methodically. Every text, every missed call, every timestamp. His growing fury caught in digital stone, undeniable and permanent. By 4:30 in the morning, he'd sent 14 messages and called 6 times. I hadn't replied to a single one, and I could feel his panic rising with every ignored call. His tone shifted, rage turning into desperation. "Clara, please, we need to... You can't just do this. I know you're upset, but this is way too much. Just let me explain." I almost laughed at that last one. Explain what? That his wallet, which he said was lost, sat right in his nightstand drawer? That the tavern ANTAP receipt proved he lied about helping Marcus? That he was spending the night at another woman's place while texting me not to worry? What kind of explanation could make any of that okay? My tea had gone cold, so I got up to brew a fresh cup. While waiting for the water, I stood by the kitchen window, gazing out as the city slowly came alive. Streetlights faded, pale in the dawn. A garbage truck rumbled by. A car alarm blared, then stopped. The world kept turning, completely unaware that mine had just split into before and after. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table. I ignored it and poured hot water over a new tea bag, watching the color spread and cloud the cup. When I sat down, 3 new messages waited. The tone had shifted again, now the familiar tactic I'd seen from August countless times when cornered. Manipulation, dressed up as vulnerability. Lies wrapped in apologies. "Hook, I'm sorry. I wasn't even at Sienna's. I lied. I was actually at my brother's. We fought, and I panicked. I didn't want to add to your stress. Please call me. We can fix this. I messed up, but we're stronger than this." I read it 3 times, not because I believed a word, but because it showed how little he respected me, how badly he underestimated my smarts. Even when caught red-handed with proof that couldn't be denied, he kept lying, just a softer version this time, hoping I'd swallow it because it was easier than facing the ugly truth of his betrayal. He actually thought I was so desperate to keep him in my life, worn down after 3 years of gaslighting and money troubles, that I'd take this new lie just to avoid the heartache of letting go. That arrogance ignited a cold, hard resolve inside me. He actually thought I was so desperate to stay, so beaten down by 3 years of gaslighting and money abuse, that I'd swallow this new lie just to dodge the pain of breaking free. His arrogance sparked something cold and definite inside me. I set my phone down on the table and opened my laptop. My fingers moved with purpose, as if they already knew what needed to be done before my mind had fully caught up with the thought. I signed into our family phone account, the one I'd been paying for both of us on for the past year since he was between jobs and needed to stay connected for networking. The plan I covered, the one with both our phones listed, and most importantly, the one tracking location data. I pulled up the location history for the last 30 days. What I found sent a chill through me, but also ignited a burning anger inside, like my body couldn't decide whether to freeze or explode. There were multiple visits to Sienna's address, late nights and hours-long stays. That alone was painful enough. But what caught my eye even more was another pattern. The Grand View, a rundown hotel on the north side of town, the kind with hourly rates and a back entrance to the parking lot. His location showed up there again and again, sometimes more than once a week. I opened the calendar on my phone, the one I kept because August never remembered anything unless it worked to his advantage. I began matching the dates. Every single trip to that hotel lined up perfectly with a night he claimed to be working late on some freelance gig, helping a friend with an emergency, or meeting potential clients for drinks. October 15th, Grand View from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. He told me he was finishing a website design with a tight deadline. October 8th, Grand View from 8 p.m. to midnight. He said he was helping his friend Trevor fix car trouble. September 29th, Grand View from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. He said he was at a networking event for freelancers. This pattern stretched back for weeks, maybe months if I scrolled further. This wasn't a slip-up or a one-time betrayal. This was planned, deliberate, a double life maintained with precision and lies told to someone he thought was too naive, too trusting to check. My hands trembled as I took screenshots, dates, times, locations, GPS coordinates, all proof of his lies that couldn't be denied or explained away. This wasn't just cheating. This was something much darker. A clear sign of the disrespect he held for me, how completely he had fooled me while I worked myself to the bone to support us. The sun was just starting to rise outside, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. My phone buzzed again with a new message from August, but I didn't even look. I had everything I needed now, and I was done waiting for him to face the truth. I stared at the screenshots on my laptop until daylight fully flooded the room, turning my gray apartment warm and golden. The location data didn't lie, no matter how many times I checked. The pattern stayed the same, undeniable proof of his calculated deception. At 7:15 in the morning, as the city came alive outside, car doors slamming, a dog barking, the coffee shop on the corner lifting its metal gate, I opened a new message and typed steadily. I know about Sienna, I know about the Grand View, I know about darker truths, proof of just how deeply he despised me, how fully he'd played me for a fool while I drained myself to keep us afloat. Outside my window, the sunrise began, painting the sky with pinks and golds. My phone buzzed again with another message from August, but I didn't bother to check it. I already had all I needed. I was done waiting for his truth. I stared at the screenshots on my laptop, full while I worked myself to exhaustion to support us both. The sun was starting to rise outside my window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone buzzed again with another message from August, but I didn't look at it. I had everything I needed now, and I was done waiting for him to tell me the truth. I stared at the screenshots on my laptop. I stared at the screen until the sun was fully up, the soft morning light turning my apartment from dull gray to warm gold. The location data never budged no matter how many times I checked it. The pattern stayed the same. The proof of his carefully planned lies was right there, undeniable and damning. At 7:15 in the morning, as the city outside woke up with car doors slamming, a dog barking nearby, and the corner coffee shop lifting its metal gate, I opened a new text message. My hands didn't shake at all as I typed, I know about Sienna. I know about the Grand View Inn. I know about the $147 you blew at Tavern. And tap, claiming you were helping Marcus. I know you're lying about being at your brother's place. Your location history shows you're still at Sienna's building. I know all of it, August. You're free. So am I. I attached 3 screenshots. The location data showing his repeated visits to both Sienna's apartment and the hotel, a photo of the tavern and tap receipt, and a clear map of his lies and GPS coordinates and timestamps that couldn't be spun or erased. Then I hit send. For nearly 30 seconds, I just stared at my phone, waiting for the three dots that meant he was typing back. The next lie, the next manipulation, the next push to make me doubt what I saw with my own eyes. But it didn't take long. Before he could reply, I blocked his number. That felt final, like shutting a door that had been ajar for years, letting in cold air and unwelcome guests. But I didn't stop there. I clicked through every app, every platform, every way we'd ever connected. Instagram blocked, Facebook blocked, Snapchat blocked. Even Venmo, where he'd sent me payment requests he never meant to pay, blocked. With every block, I felt lighter, like shedding a heavy coat, cutting off his reach bit by bit. By the time I finished, it was 7:45 in the morning. I brewed real coffee, not the instant kind I usually settled for, and called a locksmith. The first one couldn't come until the next day. The second had an opening at 11. "I'll take it," I said. By noon, a man named Eddie, wearing a tool belt and kind eyes, had changed both locks on my apartment door. He didn't ask why I needed it done so fast on a weekday. He just did the bum, handed me 2 new keys, and told me to have a good day. August's old key no longer worked. That felt deeper than it should have. The next couple of days passed in a strange calm I didn't fully trust. I went to work at Rosewood Diner like usual, but everything felt changed. I smiled at customers, and the smiles felt real, not just put on. I poured coffee without spilling because my hands weren't trembling with stress or fear. I gathered my tips and put them in my pocket instead of an envelope marked for someone else's bills. Janelle noticed something was different. She caught me by the coffee station during the Thursday lunch rush and studied my face like she was trying to crack a code. "Did you get a haircut?" she asked. "No, same hair, same makeup. Actually, no makeup." She cocked her head, still trying to figure it out. "Something's different. I don't know. Taller?" I laughed. "I'm the same height I've always been, not taller in inches, just like you're taking up more space or something." She grabbed the coffee pot I was holding and filled it from the machine. "It's a good look on you. Keep it." Later, I realized what she meant. I'd stopped apologizing for being here, stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable, stopped backing down when someone cut in front of me, or when a rude customer pushed in, or when another waitress wanted the best section. I'd started standing tall, making eye contact and saying, "Excuse me," instead of "sorry" when someone was in my way. That Thursday night, I made dinner in my being rude or when another waitress wanted the better section. I'd started standing taller, making eye contact and saying, "Excuse me," instead of "sorry" when someone was in my way. On Thursday evening, I cooked dinner and the apartment was quiet. Nothing fancy, just scrambled eggs and toast. But I set the table like it was a big deal. Used a real plate instead of eating straight from the pan. Poured water into a glass instead of drinking from the tap. These little things felt like I was getting back something I'd lost without even realizing it. I was halfway through my meal when my phone rang. It was a number I recognized. At first, I wanted to let it go to voicemail. I had been getting calls from unknown numbers lately, probably August, trying to break through the blocks I'd set up. But something made me answer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the confidence that I could hang up at any time. "Hello, Clara," said a woman's voice. "Picky kitten, this is Sienna." My whole body froze, my fork hung in the air, then I carefully set it down on my plate. Suddenly, I wasn't hungry anymore. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me," she said hurriedly, like she was afraid I'd hang up before she could finish. "And I totally get it if you just want me to leave you alone. But I have to tell you something. You deserve to hear it." I should have hung up, should have blocked her number like the others, gone back to my eggs, my quiet night, my new life without August, but I didn't. "I'm listening," I told her. I could hear her taking a breath, like she was gathering her thoughts. "After you left that night, after I saw the box and the receipt and everything you said, I confronted August. At first, you tried to deny it. You said I was crazy, jealous, insecure, that I was making it all up because I couldn't handle the breakup." My jaw tightened. Even now, caught red-handed, he was trying to make me the villain. "But I pushed him," Sienna went on. "I showed him the receipt photo you gave me and asked for an explanation. Eventually, he admitted everything." Her voice cracked a little. Clara, I had no idea you two were still together. He told me you had broken up 6 months ago. Said you were just roommates sorting out the lease, friends who were no longer a couple. He talked about you like someone he cared about but had grown distant from, not like someone he was hiding from and living with. Suddenly, the room felt too cramped, too hot. I got up and opened the window, letting in the cool October air and the city noises below. I believed him, Sienna said, now crying, because he sounded so sincere. He told me how tough the breakup was, but how mature you both were being about it. He showed me texts that made it seem like you two were just managing bills and apartment stuff. I never would have gone after him if I'd known the truth. I'm not that person, Clara. I don't pursue men who are in relationships. But he made me think there was no relationship left to pursue. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction in her pain, wanted to say something harsh, call her naive or foolish, but I couldn't, because her voice echoed my own feelings. The shock of betrayal, the shame of being fooled, the anger for not seeing it sooner. We'd both been played by the same person, fed lies custom made for each of us, both made to feel special, like the one he truly wanted. Thank you for telling me, I said, not knowing what else to say. Arms, Sienna said, her voice breaking as she cried. I believed him because he sounded so honest, because he told me how tough the breakup had been, but how mature you both were handling it, because he showed me texts that made it seem like you were just settling bills and apartment matters. I would never have done this. I'm not that kind of person, Clara. I don't chase men who are in relationships, but he convinced me there was no relationship to compete with. A part of me wanted to feel pleased about her pain, wanted to say something harsh about her being naive or foolish. But I couldn't because I heard myself in her voice. The shock of knowing you have been lied to. The shame of believing someone playing you. The anger at yourself for not seeing it sooner. We'd both been fooled by the same man. Both told stories made just for us. Both made to feel special, chosen, like we were the one he truly wanted. Thank you for telling me, I said, unsure what else to say. There's more, Sienna whispered, her voice dropping even lower. I just can't stop thinking about it, about all the other things he might have lied about. And I kept coming back to that hotel you mentioned, the Grand View. The name felt oddly familiar, like I'd seen it somewhere before. My chest tightened even though I wasn't moving. I went through old messages, she said, from way back in July. He'd said he was meeting someone there for a business deal. I remember thinking it was a strange place for work, but he said the other person wanted somewhere quiet. I didn't ask more. I shut my eyes, already sensing where this was heading. Yesterday, I called the hotel. I told them I thought I left my credit card and needed to check if they found it. They connected me to the bar manager. And Clara, there's someone else. Those words hung heavy. The bartender at the hotel restaurant named Rachel. The manager accidentally let it slip when I asked about the date I'd been there. He said something like, that was Rachel's shift. She's really detail-oriented. She'd remember if a card was left behind. And then he added, August's girlfriend always keeps tabs on that stuff. My voice cracked. He said, August's girlfriend is always on top of things like that. The room seemed to spin. I held on to the window frame to steady myself. I played clueless, asked who August was, and the manager got nervous, realizing he'd said too much. But he confirmed August is a regular there, and that he and Rachel have been seeing each other for at least 4 months, maybe even longer, Clara. I couldn't catch my breath. The air felt thick and heavy. After I hung up, I kept digging, Sienna said. A friend of mine knows folks who work there, and she made some calls. Claire. He's been juggling at least 3 of us. You, me, and Rachel. Maybe more. Each of us thinking we were the only one. Each of us fooled with lies crafted perfectly for us. My eggs sat cold on the plate, congealing. Suddenly, my apartment didn't feel like a sanctuary, but like a glass house. Everyone could see right through me exposed. Sienna went on, sharing what else she'd uncovered, how the timeline fit, revealing how August managed multiple relationships with the skill of a pro who's done this before. But her voice drifted off. When we finally hung up 20 minutes later, I stood by the window, staring out at the street below, people walking dogs, driving cars, living ordinary lives with their normal problems. I'd thought finding his wallet was the big moment. Delivering that box to Sienna was the peak. Blocking him and changing the locks was the finale. But this was on another level. This wasn't a boyfriend who slipped up once or had a moment of weakness. This was a man living double lives, telling each woman the exact thing she wanted to hear, spinning stories and excuses like a master con artist. And I'd been so exhausted, worn down by working myself to the bone to support us, I never saw it coming. I stayed there until sunset, the streetlights flickering on, trying to make sense of who I'd truly been sharing my life with for 3.5 years. Completely. This wasn't some boyfriend who slipped up once or made a single bad choice. This was a man living multiple lives at once, telling each woman exactly what she needed to hear, creating fake crises and excuses with the skill of someone who'd mastered lying. And I'd been so exhausted, so worn down from working myself to the bone to support us both that I never noticed. I stayed there until the sun went down and the streetlights flickered on, trying to understand who it had been sharing my life with for 3.5 years, I began to wonder if I'd ever truly known him at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, all the drawers and filing cabinets in my apartment thrown open, pulling out papers I'd kept without really understanding why. Receipts stashed in coat pockets, bank statements filed away. Screenshots of text messages from fights when August denied saying things I knew he had. 3.5 years of proof I didn't even realize I was saving. By sunrise Friday morning, my kitchen table was covered in tidy piles. Bank statements, Venmo history, gift receipts, text threads, and a timeline I'd sketched out on notebook paper. From dates to amounts to broken promises, all in order. The number at the bottom hit me hard. $4,300. That was just what I could prove with paperwork. The real total had to be higher. Cash I'd handed him with no trail, meals I paid for without keeping any receipt, utilities, groceries, all coming out of my account month after month while he made no contribution. I brewed some coffee and stared at the evidence spread out before me. In the morning light, it didn't feel like memories anymore. It looked like a case file. At 9 a.m., I called Jordan. We'd gone to community college together 5 years back, both of us trying to figure life out, working part-time to pay for classes. He'd figured it out, landed a tech job at a downtown startup doing some data work I barely understood, but paid well enough for him to live alone in a nice place. I was still stuck at Rosewood Diner, stuck in place. "Claire, are you okay?" His voice held concern. I didn't usually call this early. "Can you meet me for coffee? I need some advice." "Sure thing. I'll be on my lunch break at noon at the diner. I'll see you then." The morning shift dragged on. Every customer seemed impossible. More coffee, extra cream, eggs too runny or not runny enough, needing to be remade. Janelle kept giving me worried glances but wisely asked nothing. At noon, Jordan showed up in his usual hoodie and jeans, same old look but with new sneakers that probably cost more than my weekly wage. He slid into the back booth the staff used for breaks, and I handed him 2 coffees along with the folder I'd prepared. "What's going on?" he asked. "You sounded stressed on the phone." I set the folder down between us. "I broke up with August." His eyebrows shot up. "Finally. What happened?" I gave him the quick rundown, the lost wallet that wasn't, the proof of him crashing at Sienna's place, the other women, all the lies woven together. Jordan's face shifted, surprise to anger, and then to what looked like a held back "I told you so." "Good, Ian," he said at last. "He was always a user, Clara. I'm glad you saw it." "There's more," I said, pushing the folder toward him. "The money part." He flipped through the documents, scanning bank statements and Venmo transactions, each with hopeful notes. Car broke down, investment that'll pay back Friday, temporary loan until my paycheck clears. None of it ever paid back. "Jesus, Clara," Jordan said softly, looking up at me. "This is unbelievable." Sounded stressed on the phone. I set the folder on the table between us. "I broke up with August." His eyebrows jumped. "Finally, what happened?" I gave him the short version, the text about the lost wallet that wasn't lost, the proof of him crashing at Sienna's place. The other women, the nonstop lying. Jordan's face shifted from surprise to anger to something like he wanted to say, "I told you so," but held back. "Good," he finally said. "He was always a user, Clara. I'm glad you saw it." "There's more," I said, pushing the folder toward him. "The money stuff." He opened it and started reading. I watched his face as he scanned the bank statements, the Venmo payments with their hopeful notes. "Car repair emergency. Investment will pay back Friday. Temporary loan until my paycheck clears." None of it was ever paid back. "Jesus, Clara," Jordan said softly. He looked up at me. "This is over $4,000? More like 4,300. I said, "That's just what I can prove. The real amount is even higher." He kept flipping through pages, text messages where August promised to pay me back, my bank statements showing rent payments for 18 months straight, all without a single dime from him, even though he lived in my apartment. Then there were receipts for gifts I bought for him, birthday presents, Christmas gifts, random surprises that added up to thousands more. "Clara," Jordan said carefully, setting down the folder, "you know you can file a small claims case for this, right? This isn't just you helping out your boyfriend. This is fraud. And you have the paperwork to prove it." That word hit me like an ice-cold splash. Fraud. I'd been calling it helping, supporting, being a good partner. August had called it borrowing from someone who loves him, temporary loans, investments in our joint future. But the law called it something else entirely. "I didn't even know that was an option," I admitted. "You absolutely can do this," Jordan said. "Small claims court is made for exactly these situations. The limit here is like $10,000, so you're well under that, and you have proof for everything. That's usually the tough part, but you already have it." He pulled out his phone and started typing. "I know someone, a lawyer friend, well, actually a friend of a friend who offers consultations. Her name is Ms. Vance. I'll check if she's available this week." "Jordan, I can't afford a lawyer. Consultations are free, and honestly, for a case this clear-cut, you probably don't even need one. But she can help you file everything right. Make sure you don't overlook anything." He looked up from his phone. "You deserve to get your money back, Clara. He stole from you." That word felt too harsh, but looking at the evidence spread out before us, I couldn't argue with it. Jordan booked me an appointment for Saturday morning. Ms. Vance's office was above a used bookstore downtown, up a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. The door at the top had frosted glass with her name in gold letters, peeling at the edges. She answered on the second knock. A woman in her 50s with short gray hair, sharp eyes behind rectangular glasses, and a no-nonsense vibe that reminded me of my old high school math teacher, the kind who didn't tolerate excuses. "You must be Clara," Jordan said. "Good to have you. Come in and sit." Her office was small but tidy. Bookshelves lined with legal books, a desk piled with neat stacks of papers, two chairs facing each other with a small table between them. It smelled like old books and strong coffee. I sat down and handed her the folder I'd prepared. She opened it without a word and started reading. I watched her face as she went through my documents. At first, she looked neutral. She'd probably seen this kind of case before, but as she read on, her expression changed. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed. When she got to the text where August promised to pay me back next week, over and over for 18 months, she looked genuinely angry. "Clara," she said after about 20 minutes, setting the folder down, "this is one of the clearest cases of financial exploitation I've seen in years. You have evidence for everything. The loans with explicit promises to repay, the shared expenses he never paid even though he lived with you. The clearest financial abuse case I've seen in a long time. You have proof for everything. The loans with explicit promises of repayment, the shared expenses he never contributed to despite living with you. The story of deceit unfolded right from his own mouth." She pulled out a legal pad and started jotting down notes. "You don't even need a lawyer for small claims court. With this proof, you can represent yourself and win hands down. But I want to help you file it right. Too many women have lost money to men who confuse kindness for weakness." Her words hit me deep. My eyes stung, and for the first time since all this began, tears gathered. Not tears of sadness, but ones filled with anger and validation. Tears that said, "At last, someone believed me," without needing me to explain or justify. "How long will this take?" My voice cracked. She smiled, not a happy smile, but one full of resolve. "We can file by week's end. The court date will probably be 4 to 6 weeks later. You'll have to serve him papers. We'll handle that. And then you just show up with this evidence and see him try to explain it away. What if he doesn't show up? You win by default. Either way, Clara, you're getting your money back." Leaving her office an hour later, I had a plan, a timeline, and the first real hope I'd felt since finding August's wallet tucked in his drawer. Miss Vance walked me out and gave my shoulder a squeeze. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "Don't let anyone guilt you over it." I walked down the creaky stairs into the bright afternoon sun. The bookstore below had its door open, strings of classical music floating out. A couple strolled by, hand in hand. A kid rolled past on a skateboard. Life carried on around me while mine slowly pieced itself back together. Halfway home, I spotted Mrs. Delgado struggling with grocery bags at the base of our building's steps. She was 72, had called apartment 2B home for 30 years, and had been widowed for 10. I'd helped her before, carrying things, fixing her computer, showing her how to use her phone. She always insisted on paying me back with food, coffee, or advice I didn't realize I needed. "Mrs. Delgado, let me help you." She looked up, relief washing over her face. "Clara, thank you. These bags feel heavier every year." I lugged them up 3 flights of stairs. We shared the same broken elevator, and she invited me in for coffee. Her apartment smelled of cinnamon and aged books, pictures of grandchildren filling every surface. The furniture was worn but well cared for, everything neat and in place. She brewed coffee in a percolator that was probably older than me, and we sat at her small kitchen table. She asked about work and my week, and before I knew it, I was sharing around everything. Not legal stuff, but the raw truth, the lies, the betrayal, the other women, the money, and how I decided to fight back instead of hiding away quietly. She listened quietly, nodding at just the right moments, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "You seem different lately, mija," she said, lighter, as if you've put down a heavy burden you've carried too long. "I feel different," I confessed. "Maybe stronger, or maybe just less worn out." She reached out and took my hand. "My Roberto, he was a good man. We had 43 years before cancer took him. But before Roberto, I wasted 3 years on someone who made me feel small, someone who took and called it love." I squeezed her hand, waiting. Her grandchildren covered every surface. The furniture was worn but cared for, and everything had a place. She made coffee in a percolator that was probably older than me, and we sat at her small kitchen table. She asked about work, about my week, and I found myself telling her everything. Not the legal details, but the emotional truth, the lies, the betrayal, the other women, the money, the decision to fight back instead of just walk away quietly. She listened without interrupting, nodding in the right places, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "You seem different lately, mija," she said when I finished. "Lighter, like you put down something heavy you'd been carrying too long." "I feel different." I admitted, stronger, maybe, or just less tired. She reached across the table and took my hand. "My Roberto, he was a good man. We had 43 years together before the cancer took him. But before Roberto, I wasted 3 years on someone who made me small, someone who took and called it love." I squeezed her hand, waiting. The day I walked away from him, my mother said something that stuck with me forever. She told me, "Sweetheart, sometimes the worst people teach us the most powerful lesson, that we're stronger than we ever imagined." I could see tears and wisdom shining in Mrs. Delgado's eyes as she said it. "You're living this lesson right now, and one day you'll look back and realize that man didn't break you. He just showed you how strong you really are." Her words sank deep into my heart like a quiet blessing, giving me permission to be furious and strong. All at once, I stayed for another hour sipping coffee and listening to her stories about life. When I finally got up to leave, she hugged me tightly at the door. "You're going to be okay, Clara. More than okay." On the walk back to my apartment, I believed her with all my heart. Miss Vance filed all the paperwork on a Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after we'd met. That same evening, she called me while I was at work to confirm everything was official. "It's done," she said, paper shuffling sounds in the background. "Your court date is set for November 14th, 9 in the morning. You need to arrive half an hour early." November 14th, 6 weeks away. It felt like both a lifetime and barely any time at all. "So what happens now?" I asked, stepping into the back alley behind the diner where my signal was stronger and no one could eavesdrop. "Now we wait," she replied. "The court will serve him the papers within the week. He'll have time to respond, get a lawyer if he wants, and prepare his defense. Then you show up with your evidence and let the judge settle it." After hanging up, I lingered in the alley, breathing in the cool October air mixed with the smell of fryer grease from the vents. 6 weeks to wait, 6 weeks knowing he was probably aware I was coming. The thought should have made me nervous, but instead, it gave me purpose. The next 3 weeks moved in a strange new rhythm. I kept working at this diner, pouring coffee, taking orders, collecting tips, but something deep inside me had changed. When Janelle asked me to cover her Saturday shift, my only day off that week, I said no. Just no. No need for the usual sorry or excuse. She was surprised but didn't push. When a customer snapped his fingers for a refill, I walked right past him to help the table I was already attending, then circled back when I was ready. The old me would have jumped immediately, apologizing for not being faster. Sundays became my meal prep days. Chicken, rice, and vegetables neatly packed for the week ahead. No more gas station sandwiches eaten alone between shifts. No more skipping meals to save for August's emergencies. I slept with my windows open, even when the cold crept in. The city's sounds, cars passing, people chatting, distant sirens, and loud music used to keep me awake with fear. Now they felt like friends, proof that life kept moving forward and that I was part of it. These small changes built into something bigger. I was slowly reclaiming my space in the world. August tried to reach me, but not directly. He couldn't. I'd blocked him everywhere, so he used other people. One night, Marcus called while I was folding laundry. "Listen, August wants me to reach out." "No," I cut him off instantly. "Just hear me out. He's sorry for everything. He knows he messed up. He just wants a chance to explain." Apartment cold. The city sounds, cars passing, people talking, distant sirens, someone's music playing too loud used to keep me awake. Now they felt like companionship, proof that the world was continuing on and I was part of it. Small changes, but they added up to something bigger. I was learning to take up space in my own life again. August tried to reach me. Not directly, he couldn't. I'd blocked him everywhere, but through other people. Marcus called one evening while I was folding laundry. "Listen, August wanted me to reach out." "No," I said, cutting him off. "Just hear me out. He feels really bad about everything. He knows he messed up. He just wants a chance to explain, to apologize properly. Marcus will speak in court with a judge there and the papers ready. That's the only conversation I want to have." Silence on the other end. Then finally they get it. "For what it's worth, I believe you're doing the right thing. He owes you that money. No doubt about it." I agreed and hung up. November 14th came, cold and bright, the kind of crisp fall morning where your breath hangs in the air and the sun feels sharp and unrelenting. I had taken the day off work, telling my manager I had a doctor's appointment, which wasn't exactly true, but close enough. I wore the only professional outfit I owned, black pants and a white blouse I bought 2 years ago for a bank job interview that never called back. The pants fit a bit loose now. I dropped weight over the past month without trying, probably from stress or from actually eating proper meals instead of whatever was cheapest. I arrived at the courthouse half an hour early, just like Ms. Vance told me. The building was exactly what I expected, cold and impersonal. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, linoleum floors worn down, and plastic chairs bolted to the floor. People sat scattered in the waiting room, looking nervous, angry, or resigned to whatever was coming. I found a seat near the window and pulled out my folder of evidence, even though I'd already gone over it a dozen times. Receipts, bank statements, text messages, and a timeline I'd made showing 3.5 years of empty promises. "Clara?" I looked up. Miss Vance was walking toward me in a gray suit, carrying a briefcase that looked like it had seen better days, maybe decades ago. "You ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I answered. "Good. Remember, speak clearly, stick to the facts. Let the evidence do the work. The judge has already seen your documents. This is just a formality now." I nodded, my stomach tight with a kind of nervous energy that felt more like anticipation. That's when I saw him. August walked in through the main doors with a woman I didn't recognize, a blonde in her 30s, wearing a fancy coat and touching his arm with that familiar, possessive gesture. The same way I'd seen him do with Sienna, with me, and now probably someone new. Not Sienna, not Rachel from the hotel, someone different, or someone from his past I never knew about. He wore a button-down shirt I'd never seen before, dark jeans and freshly polished shoes. He actually dressed up for court, like looking nice could erase what he'd done. When he spotted me, his face shifted in a complicated way. Surprise turned into anger, then maybe shame, before settling into a forced calm that didn't touch his eyes. I held his gaze, didn't look away, didn't smile or frown, gave him nothing to read. After a few seconds, he was the one who broke eye contact. The woman leaned in and whispered something in his ear. He nodded, and they sat across the waiting room from me. She kept glancing my way, trying to figure out who I was and why I mattered. Good luck with that, I thought. You'll figure it out. Or maybe you won't, and he'll just move on to the next one. Clara Martinez, a clerk called my name from the doorway. I stood, gathered my folder, and followed Miss Vance into the courtroom. The room was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic courtrooms you see on TV. The judge sat contact. The woman with him whispered something in his ear, and he nodded, and they sat on the opposite side of the waiting area. She kept glancing at me like she was trying to figure out who I was and why I mattered. Good luck with that. I thought you'll figure it out eventually or you won't, and he'll move on to the next one. Clara Martinez, a clerk called my name from the doorway. I stood, grabbed my folder, and followed Miss Vance into the courtroom. It was smaller than I'd imagined, more like a conference room than the dramatic courtrooms you see on TV. The judge sat at the front, behind a raised desk, sat a woman in her 60s with gray hair and reading glasses hanging on a chain. There was a table for Ms. Vance and me on one side, and another table on the other side for August and his lawyer. August came in shortly after with a public defender who seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else. Young, maybe fresh from law school, shuffling papers with the energy of someone clearly unprepared. The hearing started quickly. The judge skimmed the case summary, asked if both parties were present, then looked at me. "Ms. Martinez, you claim the defendant owes you $4,300 in unpaid loans. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. Do you have proof?" "Yes, Your Honor." I opened my folder, and Miss Vance helped me lay out everything. Bank statements showing direct transfers to August's check labeled as car repair loan and temporary help until paycheck. Venmo transactions with dates and descriptions. Text messages where he promised repayment every month for several months. Receipts for shared rent that I paid alone for a year and a half while he lived in my apartment. The judge carefully examined every piece of evidence, taking notes. Then she faced August. "Mr. Reeves, do you deny receiving this money from Ms. Martinez?" August's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client admits to receiving financial help from Ms. Martinez during their relationship. However, he claims it was mutual support between partners, not loans to be paid back. Does your client have records of his financial contributions to their shared home?" The lawyer shuffled papers nervously. "No, Your Honor, but does your client have anything proving these transfers were gifts, not loans?" More shuffling. Relationships often involve that kind of support. "I'll take that as a no." The judge studied the text messages, reading one aloud. "Thanks, babe. I'll pay you back as soon as my check clears next Friday." That was sent on March 12th. Did that check clear, Mr. Reeves? August shifted uncomfortably. "I had unexpected expenses." "That's not what I asked. Did you repay Ms. Martinez as promised?" "No, but thank you." The judge made more notes and reviewed the evidence silently for a few minutes. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. Finally, she looked up. "The plaintiff has clear documentation of $4,300 in loans with explicit written promises to repay. The defendant provided no counterproof and no evidence of contributions to shared expenses. This is a clear breach of a verbal contract backed by written proof. She turned to August. Mr. Reeves, I rule in favor of the plaintiff. You must repay Ms. Martinez $4,300 plus court fees of $287, totaling $4,587. Payment plans are available through the clerk's office. Do you understand? August's face flushed red. The judge repeated firmly, do you understand? Yes, he said through clenched teeth. Something opened inside me. Not triumph exactly, something quieter and deeper. Proof and validation. The knowledge that I wasn't crazy, not dramatic, not inventing stories. I had been right all along. As we left the courtroom, the feeling stayed with me. Shared household expenses he claims to have paid. This is straightforward breach of verbal contract with written documentation. She turned to August. Mr. Reeves, I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. You are ordered to repay Mrs. Martinez the full amount of $4,300 plus court fees of $287 for a total of $4,587. Payment plan options are available through the clerk's office. Do you understand? August's face had gone red. The judge repeated, her voice sharp. Do you understand? Yes, he said through clenched teeth. Something cracked open in my chest, not triumph exactly. Something quieter but deeper. Vindication, validation, the knowledge that I wasn't crazy, wasn't dramatic, wasn't making things up. I'd been right all along. As we filed out of in that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. Miss Vance gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Well done, he has 30 days to start paying up or face more penalties. I said, thank you for everything. You handled the tough part. I just did the paperwork. As I walked toward my car in the parking lot, I heard footsteps behind me. Clara. Wait, August's voice said. I stopped and turned. He had left his new girlfriend at his car and jogged over to catch up with me. Up close, he looked tired, older somehow. I know you're angry, he said, slightly out of breath. I know I messed up, but did you really have to take this to court? Did you have to humiliate me like this? I stared at him, really looked at him for the first time in 3 years. I didn't see the man I'd imagined or the person he promised to be. Instead, I saw exactly who he was, someone who took and took, then resented you for calling him out. I didn't humiliate you, August, I said calmly. I held you accountable. There's a difference. He opened his mouth to say something, but I was already turning away, heading to my car. Clara, he called after me. I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove home through the afternoon traffic, feeling the weight of 3 years finally lift from my shoulders. When I got back to my apartment, I paused in the doorway and just looked around. The dripping faucet was fixed. The bills were all paid. The couch was still secondhand, and the apartment still small. But it was mine. All mine. And that was more than enough. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, leaning my back against it for a moment. The place looked just like I'd left it that morning. Small, simple, unchanged, but fundamentally different in a way I couldn't quite explain. The faucet that used to leak was finally silent. I'd fixed it myself 2 weeks ago with the help of a YouTube tutorial and a $20 part from the hardware store. The bill sat neatly on the counter, all paid and manageable. The couch was still old with a ripped armrest, but it was mine, truly mine. I set my purse down and went to the window, looking out over the city. People were finishing work, heading home, living their regular lives. The sun was setting, painting everything in warm shades of amber and gold. I felt something settle in my chest. Not exactly happiness, but peace, the kind of peace that comes from doing the hard thing and coming through it. 6 months passed quietly after that. No big dramas or sudden changes like you see in movies. I still worked at the Rosewood Diner, still poured coffee, took orders, and dealt with customers who thought tipping was optional. I still came home with sore feet and grease stains that never quite washed out. Some months, rent was a struggle when tips ran low or surprise bills showed up. My apartment still had that one-bedroom light that flickered no matter how many bulbs I changed. The elevator was still broken more often than not. The neighbors upstairs still fought over the same old things, shouting at the same loud volume. But I was different. I began saying yes to things I always wanted to try. The community center 3 blocks from my place offered evening classes. One Thursday, I passed by and noticed a flyer for pottery classes. Something about it caught my attention. The idea of making something with my own hands that wasn't food someone would eat. Feet and grease stains that never quite washed out. Still struggled some months to make rent when the tips were bad or an unexpected expense came up. My apartment still had that one-bedroom light that flickered, no matter how many I had replaced bulbs. But the elevator still broke down more often than it worked. Upstairs, the neighbors kept arguing about the same old things, just as loud as ever. But I was different now. I began saying yes to things I'd always been too scared to try. The community center just 3 blocks away was offering evening classes. One Thursday evening, I passed by and spotted a flyer for pottery. Something about it called to me. The thought of crafting something by hand that wasn't food someone would eat really pulled at my heart. They told me to just consume and forget, but I wanted something meaningful that would last. August used to make fun of that, calling it hipster nonsense and a waste of money. He said I should stick to practical things, like picking up extra shifts or learning skills that could land me a better job. But I signed up anyway. The class was tiny, 6 women, each there for her own reason. Our instructor was Helen, a retired teacher with clay permanently stuck under her fingernails and patience that never ran out. She showed us how to center the clay, to feel its pushback, and to work with it instead of fighting it. My first tries were total disasters. Bowls so lopsided they tipped over, mugs with handles that wouldn't stay on, vases that looked childlike at best. But Helen just smiled and said, "Try again. Clay forgives." By class 3, I managed to make something that looked on purpose. A small bowl, a little uneven, but usable. One evening, Helen watched me and said, "You throw like someone not afraid to mess up anymore." I looked at her, hands slick with the wet clay. I told her I'd already survived far worse messes. This was nothing. She nodded like she understood something I hadn't said out loud. The money from the court judgment came in fits and starts. 200 here, 150 there, always just before the deadline. Like August was testing how close he could cut it without paying a penalty. He acted like he was forced to pay, not like he felt sorry or wanted to make things right. I put each check in without a second thought and transferred the money into a savings account I'd opened just for this. The first savings account I'd ever had as an adult. I named it Clara's Future right on the bank website. Each time I logged in and saw the balance grow, even in tiny steps, it felt like taking back something that had been stolen from us. I stayed in touch with Marcus, who I kept as a friend despite everything, maybe because he'd apologized for not seeing what was going on sooner. Through him, I got updates about August's life. His new girlfriend dumped him after 2 short months. He was working part-time at a sporting goods store. He moved into a small, bleak studio apartment on the north side, according to Marcus. "He's going through a rough patch," Marcus said one night when we met for coffee. I stirred sugar into my cup, but felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, not even curiosity. "We all go through rough patches," I said. "The real test is how you treat people during those times." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right." So August became exactly what he always should have been. A figure from my past who taught me a vital lesson. Not about love or trust, but about what I'm willing to accept. About the difference between truly supporting someone and letting them take advantage of you. I didn't think about him much anymore. When I did, it was with the same emotional distance I'd have remembering a bad restaurant or a movie I didn't enjoy. A mistake I wouldn't make again. Spring arrived slowly, just like it always does in the city. Warm days mixed with cold, trees slowly budding, people starting to sit outside at coffee shops again. One Saturday morning in late April, nearly 9 months after I left that box at Sienna's door, I was sitting on my fire escape with a book and coffee when I heard Mrs. Delgado's voice calling up from the street below. I had just left that box at Sienna's door when I sat down on my fire escape with a cup of coffee and a book. That's when I heard Mrs. Delgado's voice from below. 2 floors down, I called up, "Mija, you up there?" I glanced down and saw her leaning out the window, waving. "Yeah, Mrs. Delgado, what's going on?" She called back, "I'm making tamales. Come on down and lend a hand. These old hands need some young energy. I chuckled and started climbing down the fire escape, slipping in through her always unlocked window like I had a dozen times before. Her kitchen smelled warm. Corn, spices, and the aroma of family recipes passed through time. The counter was packed with ingredients. Corn husks soaking in water, seasoned pork bubbling in one pot, masa in another. She handed me an apron and got me to work. Spread the masa like this, she showed me, her worn hands moving quick and sure. Not too thick, not too thin. Then the filling goes in, and you fold it like tucking a baby into bed. We worked side by side for hours, chatting and laughing, while her old radio played only Spanish stations. She shared stories about Roberto, not the sanitized romantic tales people spin about lost loved ones, but the real stories, the fights over money, the time he forgot their anniversary and had to sleep on the couch for a whole week, the years it took for them to finally get each other. Love isn't the glossy movie version. Mija, she said, pressing filling into a corn husk. Love is work. Every single day you choose it. Both people have to be choosing, or it just won't work. She looked down as she folded. The difference between Roberto and August, she went on, is that Roberto grew up and August never will. Some folks wait forever for life to bend to their needs. Others step up and meet life where it is. I thought about that as we worked, my hands learning the rhythm of something her mother had taught her over 60 years ago in Guadalajara, something handed down through women who had survived far harder challenges than heartbreak. When we finished, she packed a dozen tamales for me to take home. At her door, she hugged me close and said, "You're going to be just fine, Clara. Better than fine." I believed her. That evening, sitting on my couch, the same one where I'd read August's text about the lost wallet nearly a year ago, I looked around my small apartment. The flickering lamp, the worn furniture, the simple life I'd built with my own hands and hard work. Nothing had magically changed. I wasn't rich or famous or living in some fantastic new place. My world looked much the same as it had a year ago, but I was different, in ways that meant everything. I understood now the difference between love and exploitation, between true partnership and parasitism, between staying because you hope for change and leaving because you know it won't come. The box I left at Sienna's door wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was a statement of my worth. A bold line drawn in permanent ink that said, "I will not vanish just to make you comfortable." Everything that came after, the location tracking, the other women, the court case, the slow rebuilding of my life, those were just echoes, ripples after that first, powerful choice to value myself over someone else's convenience. I didn't know what was next. Maybe I'd meet someone who saw me as a true partner, not a resource. Maybe I'd stay happily single, content with my pottery classes, my friendship with Mrs. Delgado, and my Thursday evenings at the community center. Maybe. At my door, she pulled me into a tight hug and said, "You're going to be just fine, Clara. Better than fine." Her words felt real, and I believed her. That same evening, I sat on my worn-out couch, the very spot where I had read August's text about the missing wallet almost a year ago. I looked around my small apartment, the flickering light, secondhand furniture, the quiet life I'd built with my own hands and hard work. Nothing had suddenly turned magical or cinematic. I wasn't rich or famous, and I hadn't moved anywhere new. My situation was nearly the same as it was a year earlier. But I was different in ways that mattered way more than where I lived or what I owned. I'd learned to tell the difference between love and exploitation, between a true partnership and just being used, between staying because you're hoping for change and leaving because you know it won't happen. That box I left on Sienna's doorstep wasn't really about revenge. It was a bold statement of my own self-worth. It was a line I'd drawn in permanent marker saying, "I won't vanish just to suit your convenience." Everything that came after, the location tracking, the other women, the court case, the slow rebuilding of my life, those were just aftershocks. They followed that first earthquake of a decision, choosing to value myself over someone else's comfort. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe someone would come along who saw me as a partner, not a tool. Or maybe I'd stay happily single, Finding joy in pottery classes, my friendship with Mrs. Delgado, and those quiet Thursday nights at the community center. No matter what, I knew I'd taken back control of my story, something I never could have dreamed up before. But no matter what, I was ready to face it. As someone who had learned the toughest lesson of all, that putting yourself first is not selfish. It's about surviving. August lost a woman who would have given him everything she had. She wore herself thin, trying to be enough for someone who never intended to meet her halfway. I uncovered the part of me I'd hidden beneath his demands, the part that claimed space without apology, who said no without feeling the need to justify, who knew her worth and simply refused to settle. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from Janelle. "Hey, we're grabbing drinks after work tomorrow. You in?" A year ago, I'd have said no without hesitation. Saved the keys, stayed home, stayed small and cautious, always waiting for August's next crisis. This time I typed back, "Yeah, I'll be there." Outside my window, the city kept moving. Car horns, distant music, people living their lives. Those everyday sounds felt like company instead of loneliness. I made some tea, grabbed my book, and settled in on my second-hand couch. The apartment was quiet except for the fridge humming and the occasional creak of the building settling. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It was filled with me, my choices, my future, my life finally, beautifully, completely my own. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. If this journey of justice and reclaiming yourself has pulled you in, go ahead and hit that like button right now. My favorite moment? When Clara showed up at Sienna's door with that box at midnight, knowing exactly what she was doing. What about you? Tell me your favorite moment down below. And don't miss out on more powerful stories like this one. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't miss out on more powerful stories like this one.